What happens if you combine sports and business with cannabis? Since retiring from professional field hockey in 2010, Riley Cote has embarked on a quest for mindfulness, healing, and alternative and natural medicines. Riley dabbles in real estate, creative production, and mindfulness training. He is also co-founder of Bodycheck Wellness, which specializes in organically grown hemp-derived CBD extracts and functional mushroom blends. In this edition of Cannabis World Journals, the former professional field hockey player tells us about his experience with medicinal cannabis.
Okay, perfect, Riley. Well, thank you for one more time for being here with us today. And well, we would like to start. We were able to make a little research about yourself. We know that you are from Canada, but you are currently living in Pennsylvania, United States, right?
I'm actually outside of Pennsylvania and Delaware right now, but yes, right. I was living in Pennsylvania for 6 years, but yeah, right over the border now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. Well, and so during this little research, we learned that you began your experiences with cannabis at a very young age. So we wanted to know, how were those first experiences like, and how did you evolve through your professional career as a hockey player?
Yeah, I mean, looking back at my experiences with cannabis early on, there wasn't a whole lot of context around, what I was doing and what I should have expected out of the experience. It was in a very recreational settings with alcohol, and there was really obviously no mindfulness, no understanding of the substance itself, besides it being illegal and kind of introduced as a party drug, I guess, right, in the recreational setting. I guess I remember laughing a lot the first couple of times, just like hysterically, and that was kind of one of the things that resonates with me still. But like having a real true connection to it, understanding it at that time, it wasn't until a little bit later on in my life that I really started to understand it more, connect with it more, but really to understand the science of it until after I was done playing professional hockey. So I think it was around 20 when I turned pro. As a pro hockey player, I started to make sense of like how it was actually really helping me with anxiety. Definitely understood that it was helping me with sleep, but I didn't really understand. Again, I was still using it, I guess, to get high, right? I mean, but I didn't understand the therapeutic component, even though I was getting therapeutic value from it. And it wasn't until I retired from playing that I started reading some books and started making sense of my experiences that, in connection to the science that kind of supported what I was feeling and what it really kind of made sense of how it helped me with, pain, anxiety, and sleep. It just supported basically how I felt with cannabis. So then I had this aha moment. I'm like, oh, I get it. Cannabis has been medicinal this whole time. I just misused it this whole time for a lot of the time, right? So then it kind of shifted my perspective on cannabis, and then started using it a little bit more mindfully and with a little more of a goal in mind.
Okay, well, that's really well. That is correct. At the beginning, most of the people we just started like using a recreational way, but then when we start to study it a little bit, we learn more, and we have the opportunity like to get all the benefits that it has in so many different ways. Like not only for sleep, anxiety, it's also like as a pain reliever. Well, many different ways. Well, you were telling us that that you at the beginning were like in a recreational way, and then you start to study a little bit after your retirement. But what was that key moment that make you think, okay, I need to start to learn more about this? I think this is gonna be really good for me. Like that moment that make you change the switch everything in your mind.
Yeah, the moment was 2010. And I had 2 surgeries at the end of that season. And again, having that relationship with cannabis, I understood that it helped me with pain, but I didn't, I never really saw the medicinal therapeutic context quite yet, as far as like actually understanding it in the realm of wellness. But I had that relationship with it because, I mean, again, I've been using it for, at that point, how many years? I had 2 surgeries, and then I had been dealing with some substance abuse again, like, you know, in pro hockey or just in society in general. I mean, a lot of alcohol, especially in the hockey culture. And then, you know, there's a lot of pills, right? There's Ambien for sleep, there's anti-inflammatories, there's pain management tools, and cannabis obviously covers all those buckets, but it was still very illegal, still when I was still playing. So I struggled with some substance abuse stuff around just like being on the road, too many Ambiens, too many painkillers, all this other stuff. So I wanted to prove to myself that I could do, I could go through these 2 surgeries and just use cannabis on the back end of it. So basically discard the prescription drugs, because I was just like at a point in my life where I just like needed to make some serious decisions and understand some of the substance abuse and understand where some of this was coming from. So it was in that moment that I made a decision that I was just going to use cannabis. And it was not too long after that I read a book called Hemp for Health that kind of made sense of cannabis as an industrial resource, as a nutritional superfood, but also understanding the minor cannabinoids, you know, within the plant, that most people just kind of understood cannabis as, you know, high THC, and, you smoke it and you get high, and that's kind of it, right? So I started to understand this other world of cannabis that kind of supported my belief system and my choice on using cannabis as an anti-inflammatory pain management tool. And then on top of that, I started to understand that there was neurogenesis and neuroprotective properties from some of these cannabinoids, maybe not necessarily THC the way I was consuming it, but in oils that were more abundant in CBD and maybe some CBG. So me being a hockey player, I was actually a fighter within the hockey game. I was fighting 30, 35 times a year. So I had a history of, you know, repeated head trauma and a bunch of concussion issues. So then I started using it very mindfully to hopefully help reverse some of the collateral damage, if you will, some of the, you know, concussion related symptoms that I was dealing with cannabis, but in a completely different form now. Now we're talking about, you know, sublingual, ingesting cannabis that way. So, but yeah, to answer your question, it was 2010. I had this aha moment. I was like, this is the moment I'm going to actually experience using cannabis for sure as a medicinal tool, because instead of the prescription drugs, I substituted with cannabis. And then it was on after that, because I read this book and it just opened up my mind to all these possibilities around the cannabis plant outside of just medicine. So
wow, yes, it was, well, like a really important moment of your life, like to take a decision if it's prescription drugs or it's cannabis, but the best option for me. And it's really great that you start with that and that you were able to open your mind and all of these changes. I would like to ask you as well, after you decide to start to use cannabis instead of the prescription drugs, what would you say were like the difference in your body and in your mentally and physically in your life? How was that? What do you say that it's like the difference from the before and the after of that you start to use cannabis?
Well, thank God I had a relationship with cannabis, so it wasn't fully like 100%, you know, fueled by pharma, if you will, right? Where I was like a complete zombie, like some of the people I've seen that are, you know, right in the gutter, almost like junkie, right? And I say that with respect because, you know, a lot of the times it's not their fault. They kind of just like fall into the system and they get swallowed up. But so the grounding nature of cannabis, I think it helped me from going like too far. Maybe also helped me bring some, you know, level of awareness and consciousness around what was happening to me. Like, holy God, I'm like getting swallowed up by, you know, big pharma here, and you know, and just not feeling right. So to answer your question about the difference, I think it's just like one like the pharmaceutical route. I found it was like a numbing agent. There was really like a synthetic feel to it. It was almost like, it wasn't like for the ambient component, for the sleep component, it really wasn't like a real deep seated true sleep. It just felt like it was just like a mask. It was just like, okay, well, you put you to sleep and you wake up, but it wasn't like, I didn't feel like overly rested from it, if that makes any sense. Versus cannabis, wake up in the morning, feel absolutely rested. So there was like a huge difference. It was like almost like it's a chemical thing. It's like it just didn't feel natural, obviously. And then on the synthetic opioid side of things, like the pills for pain, again, just like the numbing agent of it, but like numbing the brain too, right? It wasn't like promoting creativity or promoting, you know, wholesome thinking. It was kind of just like numbing everything, right? It was numbing the pain in my arm or my leg, but it was also numbing, I think, the mind and the spirit too. So there was this like element of just like, I don't know, just not feeling human, I guess. So so again, like cannabis filled the gap for all these things, right? I mean, it's clean sleep, it's clean pain management, it's clean anxiety management, right? I mean, you don't even realize how much anxiety and stress that you're under a lot of the times, right? Until it like turns into some sort of disease state or some real issue. But again, like I've seen people go through get dragged through the mud with you know, the mental health, the SSRIs, for dealing with anxiety and depression and stuff like that, where it really robs them of their spirit, and they're almost like, you know, almost dumbed down in a sense, where they're just, you know, numb and kind of just cruise through life. They kind of exist, but they're not really engaged. So I think the biggest difference, I think the way I could describe it mentally is just like, one is conscious forming. Like cannabis, I feel like promotes some sort of increased consciousness, maybe awareness, maybe a little more in tune with your body. And I think the other one just kind of numbs it, right? It's just kind of like there's not an increase of awareness or consciousness. I think it actually probably goes the other way. I think it's a decrease in consciousness. It just, again, it's lowering your vibration. I think that's the easiest way I could describe it.
Riley, hi, my name is Veronica. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
I have one question regarding what you just told us, how this moment of realization regarding how changed and different you were when you were consuming cannabis and before with the synthetic, and how this became in a moment of your life that was poignant for you, that you had to make decisions. How was that when you started with cannabis in this sense of wellness and healing and everything? How did that was taken by the people around you, your former teammates, your family? Were they even aware that you were going to try this? What was the reaction?
Well, I wasn't overly open about it early. It was just kind of like something I just decided to do, right? I mean, it was just like a personal choice, right? I wasn't asking for permission by anybody, you know? And in fact, I actually went the other way, where I didn't want to go and see our team doctor at the end of the season to be diagnosed with any sort of, you know, concussion related stuff. Cause I didn't want to get, I knew how it worked. Basically, if they diagnose you with anything, they're going to start trying to gobble you up and put you on pills and all that stuff. So I actually intentionally just did this quietly at the start, right? And there was guys on the team that knew I was a cannabis user. I think my parents knew that I was, you know, into cannabis, but they didn't know the level and, you know, and the intention behind it, and, you know, because my parents still don't understand it fully. But I think it was yeah, it was just me doing what I felt like I needed to do to find wellness, right? I mean, at that point in my life too, I'd seen so many people getting dragged through the mud, so many people through substance abuse programs for alcohol and pills. I've just seen so many people get, you know, just different parts of health and wellness being screwed over and misled. And then again, I think there's a spiritual component here, where it's just like there was like some sort of intuitive nature of my feeling of what I needed to do. And it was like, okay, this is what I need to do, and we're going to do this, and we don't need to broadcast it, you know, but eventually, like anything, when you feel so strongly about something, you want to share it, right? And that's kind of what landed up happening. It was like, at some point, and it wasn't too far after, I was still employed by the Philadelphia Flyers. So I was, when I retired, I landed up taking a coaching job. So I was still employed by professional sports organizations. So I had to be careful too of like how I was presenting it. But eventually I stopped caring. We're at a corporate sports job, and I started talking openly about CBD and cannabis. And eventually it got to the point where people started respecting what I was doing, even though they had maybe a different perspective or opinion on what I was doing. But I landed up eventually getting enough trust from some of my colleagues, specifically the Flyers alumni, then eventually I got a platform. They're like, hey, Riley, come and present to all of our members and talk about what you're doing and how how you're managing your life and all this stuff. Because again, like on the back end of sports, it's a lot of the same stuff, right? A lot of alcohol. Guys are self-medicating with alcohol. They don't even realize they're self-medicating. They just think, okay, well, it's just a social thing to do, but yet they all have alcohol issues, right? Whether they believe it or not. They're all, stuck in the system of like surgeries and pills. A lot of these guys can hardly even walk. They got hip replacements, knee replacements, shoulders, like this and that. So like I landed up, losing a bunch of weight because I wasn't fighting anymore. I started, really engaging this world of wellness. And then, it's a vibration, right? So all of a sudden when people start asking questions too, you start talking about it, people ask questions. So then eventually it got like street cred for it. Like I got in front of the NHL Alumni Association. And again, I think it's always how you put it out there. How do you execute on, putting your information out there? And I was trying to do it the best way I possibly could, from the stuff I had learned through hockey was how to be a pro, like how to be a professional. So I wasn't going out there banging the drum and like standing there smoking joints. It was like talking about this in a very, medicinal, therapeutic, healing manner. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, people can relate to that because everyone's in pain. Everyone's got stress. Everyone's got sleep issues. So there's more of a connection-based approach when you communicate it. That was the word I was looking for. When you communicate it the proper way versus, there's a lot of the people have been banging the drum for a lot of years will stand on the street corner, in a big joint or a big leaf. And I'm not opposed to that, but it wasn't my style. I needed to be in a more professional manner. But to answer your question, it was quiet at the start. And then again, the confidence behind my belief system certainly grew because of my experience with cannabis, but also like the stuff I was reading was supporting it. So it was kind of like this, this double whammy of belief. So then when you believe in something, you're confident about it, people could sense that, right? And then after that, it was just like I didn't care at all. I mean, in fact, I was going out of my way to challenge people around, prohibition of cannabis, challenge people around the type of medicine that they're using, because I mean, cannabis it may not be the silver bullet to cure everything, but it can certainly help increase quality of life no matter what you got in some way, shape, or form. So like, I know everybody's carrying stress and some bit of anxiety, and then those two things lead to poor rest. So just from those three, pieces of recovery, it can help improve quality of life. So I'm just, just started banging the drum and just speaking more and more openly. Eventually I lost my job, probably because I was speaking too much about it, because it was still kind of before, like now it's sexy to talk about cannabis, right? Everyone's doing it now. I mean, it's like, but 10, 12 years ago, still wasn't that, even though people had been banging the drum since the 70s, but in a professional manner with athletes coming out and actually having like an intelligent perspective on it, there wasn't really a whole lot of people doing that. So but now it's like, I'm like the cannabis guy, it's like, oh, you're the cannabis guy. I'm like, I mean, that's just one of the tools, right? I mean, it's one of the many tools that Mother Nature's provided us. So
it's very interesting because, like you said, right now it's the sexy talk, no? Cannabis, everybody's doing it, and football, professional football, has had more speakers, more open athletes speaking about it, but hockey hasn't. It's very, very. I think you're basically the only one right now.
Darren McCarty would be the other one. Oh, Darren McCarty was a fighter too, and then another guy, Ryan Vandenbush. He's up in Canada. Yeah, he speaks quite. Yeah,
but it's very few compared to
other sports. Very few. Yep.
And that sport, hockey, it's very violent. It's very physical, and it has incredible trauma for the players, for the athletes. How do you think right now, compared to 12, like you said, 12 years ago, have you seen any evolution in the sport towards the plant? And your team and other players, new players right now, how do they feel about it compared to when you were banging the drum, like you said?
Oh, it's so different. I mean, well, the fact that the NFL removed cannabis from their drug testing protocols is a big step, right? NFL has been like the gatekeeper for a lot of this stuff. So that was a big step. So now guys don't have to worry about testing positive for THC. The awareness of the different cannabis products and the different delivery systems within the locker rooms themselves with individual players. So this is not like, you know, passed down from the organizational hierarchy or the medical staff. This is like the players, just awareness around cannabis-based products and how they help them recover is incredible. I would say like in the hockey world, at least 90% of players are using some sort of cannabis-based product, and it could be just a CBD product, but a lot of guys are using THC. Even back when I played, a lot of guys are still using THC, but it was just flower. Like that was the only delivery system you're going to find. So you have got a bunch of guys smoking weed and smoking the volcano, whatever, you know, that world. But now you got ingestibles, you got transdermal patches, you got sublinguals, you know, again, you got very specific microdose type of capsules. So there's this element of, you know, biohacking with cannabis now, right? Very precise type products. And less drinking. You know, it's funny. It's like back, you know, early on in you know, the beginning stages of the NHL and early on in hockey, like, you know, the 60s and 70s and even 80s. I mean, really up until like 2000s, lots and lots of drinking. It was just like, you know, that was the recovery agent. It was like, let's go work hard and then let's go just unwind with booze, right? Not thinking anything of like the impact of alcohol it has on the physical body, the mind, the spirit. So that was for years and years and years. And cannabis would never even be talked about as a recovery agent. So now it's like guys are, you know, the young generation, they've almost been growing up in the cannabis culture, in legal cannabis culture, where now it's like, okay, like, you know, I don't really want to drink. I just want to go and, you know, ingest some cannabis and go to sleep and recover. I'm not saying that they don't party, but like, you know, there's a completely different philosophy. So I'd like to see it where it's like eventually to the point where this is so science driven and so accepted that, you know, the general manager or the owner, you know, all top down approach eventually has the medical staff so versed in cannabinoid therapy or recovery where like you would see CBD products in the locker room that were provided by the team, not players bringing them in themselves. But it's so open now. I mean, I got, you know, the CBD products for the Flyers coaching staff last year, and they're all aware of their players using cannabis, not just CBD products, and they don't care because they know that, you know, especially as management and coaching staff, that I'd rather have my player using cannabis and sleeping properly the night before and getting a well-rested, you know, recovery session versus going out all night and drinking alcohol and then waking up unrested. And then you talk about performance. It's all about performance. And so they're like in the know, but it's just kind of like still like it's like it's so much more accepted, but it's still like there's still that line of like taking that next step where it's now provided by the teams versus kind of like we all know you're doing it, everyone's doing it. The NHL, even though they test for it, they don't enforce, you know, THC drug tests, but it's still a banned substance, but no one really cares. But it's still not like to the level where, again, like the medical staff, like for pain and, you know, for the massage therapist, for example, you know, rubbing some CBD, and like I would like to see it there. There's some science to suggest, like, again, like around the brain, you know, concussions, it's physical sport, like getting cannabinoids in guys' systems before, maybe protecting the brain a little bit. So if they do get their bell rung on the ice, that maybe you could have minimized the concussion. Maybe it was a 4-week concussion. Maybe it's a 2-week, or maybe it was a 2-week and now it's, you know, 1 or 2 days that you're out for. But that could be the difference. You talk about like the amount of money that's invested in pro sports and the athletes. Like that could be the difference of making the playoffs, not making the playoffs. Costs a lot of people jobs when you lose. If you lose because of man games lost, because guys were, you know, because you could have recovered better, you could have, you know, protected your player and protect your investment. I think, you know, that's where I like to see it. But from where I played, you know, to where it is now, it's like it's light years. In fact, even when I was coaching, there was guys in the back of the bus that would infuse their own peanut butter with THC, and instead of drinking beer on the back of the bus, they were eating peanut butter, and then they're just like falling asleep on the bus because it's not that easy to sleep. That was in the minor leagues. So yeah, the mentality, the perspective on this has changed significantly over time, for sure.
Mr. Code, now that you're talking about all the benefits that cannabis has for current players in your sport field, do you think your run in the hockey field when you were an active player would have been different if you applied your current life philosophy and this lifestyle that you have right now from the beginning, like when you were an active player?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think I could have lengthened my career as being smarter with recovery. You know, like again, I was using cannabis again, it's very, very differently. And had I been a little more mindful, again, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think just that perspective, just lengthening your career because you're able to take care of your body. There's more awareness around your body, right? And that's your money maker. And as soon as that breaks down, you stop getting paid. So 100%, you know, and yeah, it would have probably improved my performance too. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I show up to the rink hungover and drinking, you know, when I could have been, you know, maybe using cannabis a little more mindfully and making better decisions, you know, whether that's cannabis related or not, I don't know. But I think like long term, again, I'm so into regeneration and recovery that like, again, I tell young guys all the time, like, you know, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and you have to take care of your body. Because when you're younger, you think you're going to live forever and you think you're going to play forever until you get an injury and it stops you, right? So it's like, yeah, I think that the element of seeing this through the lens of absolute wellness, recovery, and regeneration is important. Had I had that, you know, shoulda, woulda, coulda. This is part of the story. I mean, it needed to happen this way for me to be where I'm at, anyways. Here, but yeah, I think it could have lengthened my career. I could have probably made some wiser decisions, probably performed a little bit better because I was sleeping better overall. But yeah, and yeah, again, maybe not have to deal with some of the stuff I dealt with the substance abuse wise, because I was using that in substitute for the cannabis, especially when we were on the road, right? It was like drinking pills, like pills are passed around the plane and all that stuff. So yeah, it could have probably reduced some suffering and some needless poor behavior. But you know, I think overall I made it out better than a lot of guys, because a lot of guys absolutely get gobbled up from the substance abuse and they're in and out of substance abuse programs and they never figure this out. It's it's dark for a lot of guys, you know. So I think cannabis is a positive solution to help, whether they're current or retired, help them get them out of the darkness and find them a sustainable plant medicine.
Sure, you're absolutely right about that. I'm kind of sorry that you didn't know this back then, all the benefits that it could have, but I'm also happy that it led you to what you have become today, through all the experience that you have right now and what you have shared with so many people. Taking all this into consideration, do you think that cannabis should be officially integrated into hockey, like as a recovery and protection system for all current players and future players?
Integrated into hockey current players?
Yes, like officially integrated into the hockey field.
Yeah, 100%. And that being said, I have to be careful how I say it, because I would never expect to see dry flower in a locker room where guys are smoking, cannabis or vaporizing it for that matter before a game or before practice. But cannabis-based products, like, absolutely. And I'm really into the microdosing of THC, especially ingesting it, like, it's it's the medicines in the dose, right? So if you introduce this very professionally, responsibly, obviously with the medical team, and then you have products again like the creams, the guys get massages, and there's like lotions, transdermal patches, a lot of inflammation around the legs, flushing inflammation. It's a great tool for that. Again, ingesting it, whether it's getting on the bus or getting on the plane after guys struggle with sleep. Guys struggle with sleep already from an abundance of stress and anxiety, but helping calm the nervous system post game. I think there's a huge science behind that. I mean, guys do that with other tools, with breathing and turning down the lights, and and some ambient music and stuff like that. But I feel like cannabis could be integrated in that, and just again shelving the anxiety and the stress so we can calm ourselves and sleep, maybe get an extra hour on the plane, And you know how it is. It's like the better we sleep, I always say it's the spine of recovery. If we can sleep better, we recover better, we perform better. It doesn't matter if we're an athlete or working a 9 to 5. I mean, we just feel better, right? And it's always based on how you feel. So absolutely. I think there's so many different ways you could incorporate and integrate cannabis into the modern hockey player. It just has to be done like, professionally and obviously, and just really dose, just around dosing, understanding your body. I'm so very mindful, but yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable. I think there's probably a lot more action going on in the locker rooms right now. Calculated cannabis use within the locker rooms right now. But again, I think it's more so the individuals coming together as teammates and sharing their experiences. Like, listen, I tried this product, it's 2.5 milligrams of THC. It's really good, before a workout or before my yoga recovery session. Give it a try, right? So it's not coming from the medical staff yet that I'm aware of. But I think at some point you integrate strength and conditioning with cannabis recovery and cannabis regeneration. But it's a totally different world than this recreational cannabis world, like this, and I'm not opposed to flower. I use flower too. I think there's a real, spiritual element behind using flower, but I think it's just it's a different means, right? What are you trying to accomplish? I think that's always the question you got to ask yourself, and then, then there's all these different products, all these just different delivery systems to potentially solve it. So I think the future is bright, and I think might be still a few years away from actually seeing this real scientific approach to cannabinoid recovery in sports teams, but I don't think we're too far off.
Oh yeah, hopefully that's going to be the future. Probably hockey is going to join, the hockey league in Canada or even the United States is going to join to the NFL in this kind of remove the cannabis as a doping drug or something, and right. It's going to be really good for the players because, as Veronica said before, it's a really contact sport, physical sport. It's hard. Well, I would like to go like a little bit into that wellness and mindfulness and self-care side of your work. How do you combine the studies in nutrition, exercise, recovery, plant medicine, and overall wellness with cannabis? How is that process?
Well, it's evolved. It's evolved over time, right? I use probably less cannabis now than I ever have, and it's probably because I found more tools, to integrate around the cannabis. Maybe some of the other tools are complementing it and helping, manage some of the anxiety and stress, so I don't feel like I need as much. But really, I guess it's always like this balance of work versus recovery, right? And whether you're playing sport or not, it's just it's the same concept. So there's a fine line of using cannabis for sleep and then using too much cannabis where you land up sleeping in because you're sleeping so well and deep. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But if you're trying to be a high level performer and get up earlier to get some stuff done, you have to understand your dose. And I think that goes for everything. That goes for food and goes for, essentially any substance that you'd ever put in your body. I mean, how does it affect you? What type of energy is it giving you? Is it giving you energy? Is it robbing you energy? So, again, working through this whole cannabis process and understanding cannabis, for me, it took a long time, right? I mean, you think about introduced to cannabis at 15 years old and I'm, turning 40. So, it's a long period of time, and I guess only the last like 12 years have I actually had some sort of roadmap with cannabis. But the other years, it was just like the Wild West. Like, I'm just figuring this out. There's no manual, right? So, and I didn't really, even though I used cannabis before going to the gym back in the day, like I'd smoke a big bong and it was just about getting a high before working out. Probably because I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just want to put my earphones on and just like zone in. And there was an element of flow state you could find because you're dialed into the exercise, but now, I talked about the recovery side of things, like respecting your medicine, obviously always respecting your medicine. That's like across the board, no matter what it is. But, we talk about sleep, like, find that threshold of like, what's too much THC before bed? Meaning like, not too much THC. You're going to wake up the next morning no matter what, but like, are you going to be able to get up at 4:30 in the morning if you have to? or you sleep until 7 because you had 50 milligrams of THC too much. I think people generally abuse pretty much everything that we were put in front of our faces. So finding that real disciplined, precise dose for, again, I'm talking about sleep right now, and then I'll talk about performance during the day. Again, it's like in the morning, and people will be like, well, you can use cannabis in the morning. I'm like, sometimes I do. And then they're like, wow, I could never function like that. Well, it's like, I'm not smoking. I'm not smoking, a 2-gram joint. I'm not talking about that. It might be a 2.5 milligram, capsule, which you don't even necessarily feel high from. It just kind of like, takes the edge off a little bit. And when you're more relaxed, you're able to focus more, find that flow state a little more. So I practice and teach yoga, and I find that, well, for sure, practicing, I don't necessarily love using cannabis before I teach, because I can get, even at a small dose, your mind can maybe wander a little bit, but I find that I can just kind of find flow with it. There's an element, again, of relaxation that accompanies the actual work, but like, it's not a one size fits all approach, and it's really always around the dose, because if you just throw that variable out, people just assume that, oh yeah, all cannabis is the same and all cannabis has the same effect, and every delivery system is essentially the same effect. So it's understanding what delivery system you're going to use and the potency, because what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to be more productive, or are you trying to heal because you're dealing with some sort of disease state, right? People that are going through cancer and use RSO oil, they're getting like 200 milligrams of RSO, right? Oil, and then it's intended to help them sleep. Because when and sleep really, really deep, so your body can regenerate. But most people aren't doing that, right? Most people are trying to find some level of optimization, feeling better, right? It always starts with feeling better, but then using the tool, the right way. Look at caffeine, right? It's like, well, it's a stimulant, right? It induces anxiety in a lot of people. People over consume coffee, or frazzling our nervous system. But I think small amounts of caffeine, probably not a bad thing, but we just over consume. And then we all of a sudden, and I did this myself too, when I would use cannabis and caffeine together, I'd over consume caffeine. And then I found myself using more cannabis than I needed to back off the effects of the caffeine, which was inducing anxiety and a little more stress than I wanted to carry around. So then I understand the energies, right? Understand the energy of caffeine, understand the energy of food and cannabis, and then it's just reeling it in and finding a very specific, for me now, small doses, which I like, because I can kind of just find some sense of stress management, anxiety management, but then still be able to be clear enough to focus and get my stuff done. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's yeah, it's evolved. It hasn't always been so precise, because I don't think I was that disciplined even early on when I figured this out. It was just well, part of it too, I was probably ingesting a lot more CBD than I do now too, because I was really going top heavy on the brain stuff and just trying to minimize some of the impact of the fighting. And so it was deliberate, but like any medicine, right? The idea is to not stay on the medicine forever. However, I think the unique thing about plant medicines, cannabis or psilocybin or some of these other psychedelics, is that it's spiritual, right? There's a spiritual element to it. So I think we're always needing to, at some point, maybe find some peace and and make, whether it's a sacrament but there's a spiritual element, there's a communal element to cannabis. So there's outside of just taking a pill like the pharma style, which eventually you want to get off, right? You don't want to be on pills forever, right? That's the goal, is to get off that. But I think cannabis is somewhat unique because pharmaceutical drugs don't offer spirituality, right? They don't. Not that I know. Maybe MDMA now and LSD, which were synthesized, but outside of that, most of them are designed to numb you down. So there's a spiritual element that I think that, once you kind of have more respect towards the plant, you eventually, your relationship changes with it, and then, eventually, if you can remove some of the pain with some other tools, you maybe use less, right? But I understand some people are in a lot of pain. Some people are really dealing with some serious disease states. So their relationship with cannabis is much different than mine is now. And probably was much different than mine was even when I was really targeting some certain pieces of my recovery. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing of cannabis too, is that it's personal. It's personal, and you have to figure out what works best for you, and that's listening to your body. Again, that's a spiritual thing. Listening, right? Listening, being intuitive, instinctive, versus being robotic with like, oh, you got to take this 5 times a day, and if you just don't stop doing that until you're done with the bottle, and then by that time your guts exploded, you got liver failure, and you probably got indigestion and constipation, right? I mean, so it's like, I think it helps, it just helps bring a little more awareness around how much you need to do. So if that makes any sense.
Yes, well, actually, yes, it has many things because, as you say, well, so many people it starts with coffee to try to feel better or to work better, but what we are doing it's also like making some damage to our bodies, and cannabis offers this option that depending of dosages of, well, if you are able like to be aware of the correct dosages of cannabis that you can use and everything, you can do the good for your body. You can help your body to be more efficient, to rest well, like to be working well. And related with all this wellness that you are always like showing up to the world, you create the Hemp Heal Foundation, and also you're part of Bodycheck Wellness. What is what is like the goal that you're trying to reach with this kind of, well, with this with these sorry, with these initiatives that you create?
Sure. So, well, Hemp Heals Foundation, I don't really do anything with that since COVID hit. We did a music festival in Philly. So Hemp Heals Foundations is a nonprofit organization that I founded, and it was created when I retired, like right when I retired, and had this aha moment around, oh, I understand cannabis is medicine, but I also understand cannabis as industrial resource. I think most people understood cannabis in the context of medicine at that point, or at least surface level, and just recreational cannabis use. So it was like a small little bucket. I was like more fascinated with like the history of cannabis prohibition, or just the history of cannabis use. When you talk about textiles historically being used across the planet as clothing, paper, all this amazing stuff, and then you get into like the nutritional profile of hemp seeds, right? I mean, a highly digestible protein source. So Hemp Heals was like, okay, let's bang the drum around cannabis. Yeah, the cannabis as an industrial resource as well as medicine. So it's like, it's so much more than what people give it credit for, right? And most people don't realize that like the medicine side of cannabis is illegal because of the hemp side of the cannabis plant, because that side interferes with so much more industry, right? You look at the chemical industry, you look at the synthetic fiber industry like nylon, you look at the pulp and paper industry, you look at the oil industry in general, like the synthetic world, right? That's the pharmaceutical world, the synthesized molecules. So it's public enemy number one for these large corporations. So my whole thing was just like, guys, like, to wake up. Like, if you can't buy into the medicine, we can all maybe have different opinions on, is this really medicine or is it not? But like, you can't deny that like hemp is not, an amazing industrial resource, right? So we should really agree on that. So that was Hemp Heals. Like, let's raise awareness around the cannabis plant outside, not outside of the THC, but complementary too, because it's a viable industrial resource. So in Philly, we do from 2011 to, well, until COVID, we did an annual, it's called Hemp Heals Music Festival, a music festival. We have all of these different vendors, hemp companies, cannabis companies, dispensaries, and all, just whatever, from all different walks of life. And just, we had some music with a bunch of mainly reggae bands, some type of hip hop bands as well. And then, we'd have this festival. So that was, and we raised money, and then we'd kind of deploy it to different cannabis initiatives. But since COVID hit, it kind of lost its steam because there was no like in-person concerts and all that good stuff. But hopefully we can pick that back up. I'm not sure we're gonna do it this summer, but maybe next year. But then Bodycheck Wellness is a for-profit hemp-derived CBD and functional mushroom company that I founded. When 2014 Farmville came around, it opened up like this world of CBD products, right, with the Charlotte's Web and all that stuff. But we didn't get on the first wave because I was still a little bit worried about like federal legislation and all that stuff. So we started in like 2018, and got into this this hemp space because it was federally legal under the Federal Farm Act. So all of our products are below 0.3% THC. They're all originated from marijuana genetics, but bred down the THC into high CBD varieties. And then I'm big into mushrooms as well. So we have some products that are a mixture of CBD, full spectrum CBD, as well as some functional mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, stuff like that. So it's Bodycheck Wellness. Really trying to all the things we talked about, right? It's like for the soccer mom, it's for like the average person. It's a supplement, right? I think if you understand cannabis can be more like that supplement type of world. Again, it's the dose, right? So when there's below 0.3% THC, we don't have to worry about people over consuming THC. It's just, once you start introducing higher levels of THC, then it becomes more problematic if you're overindulging in these supplements. So that's it. It's just, a recovery tool and anti-inflammatory tool, a nootropic, focus and clarity type of tool with the mushrooms. So that's Bodycheck Wellness, and we're still in business, and we're still, pushing out some interesting products. We got a couple more coming down the pipe, and just trying to be, unique. And this space is constantly evolving. So trying to stay ahead of it, trying to evolve with it. It's a marketing game too, right? So trying to play the game a little bit, but that's it.
Mr. Cote, I have a question regarding all this that you just talk about, how it's a marketing game and how you have different initiatives and how have different purposes. What exactly is the Cote culture? Because we read it and it piqued my interest, and it wasn't saying, well, what is it? What is it? And what is it about?
Yeah, so Cote culture is like my mindfulness brand, right? I mean, I teach yoga and meditation, stuff like that. And this is like, I got a bunch of other stuff going on too, but like my passion is mindfulness and yoga, honestly. So Cote culture is kind of just like taking my philosophy, which is essentially the yoga philosophy around, around wellness and thinking and the mind, and then integrating some plant medicine stuff, right? I mean, I'm big into the cannabis, obviously, psilocybin mushrooms mainly, but I'm big in the psychedelic space, mainly the plant medicine ones, not hugely fond of the way it's going with, the pharmaceutical play, but it's inevitable that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's really like, understanding the world of yoga and psychedelics, and understanding that they're essentially teaching the exact same thing, right? I mean, it's all about like, getting out of the thinking mind, getting into the heart, being more forgiving, just like doing things, without attachment to the end result, stuff like, just doing selfless work in the community versus, selfishness versus selflessness, right? All things that, I think most spiritual texts and religious texts talk about, but I'm just trying to encompass it into like a digestible, understandable, I guess, program. That's kind of what Cote culture is. I'm starting a podcast under it too, so it's kind of like my personal brand, if you will. That's like my personal philosophy, so that everything I'm involved in comes under that umbrella, if that makes any sense.
Sure, that's very interesting. Mr. Cote, I have one last question for you to wrap up a little bit this interview. What do you think is the future of cannabis in the sports world? Like in general, not only for hockey, but for sports?
I think it's got a huge role in the sports world. I think we're not too far off to see a cannabis company replace a alcohol company as one of the lead sponsors. You talk about like the sponsorship of sports. I think Canada is waiting. Like Canada's been legal now for 3 years. And from what I understand, Canopy is basically just like waiting in the weeds until Health Canada allows cannabis companies to actually advertise. As soon as that happens, then everything changes, because now all of a sudden you're getting big cannabis money, right? Instead of big alcohol money or big pharma money. So now all of a sudden, now they're in play, and then all of a sudden that changes the dynamic probably of around the drug testing, around the policies and regulations. I would like to think that maybe the US needs to probably get a federal medical program first too, because that international border complicates things with travel. I think that's why there's a lot of liability with guys crossing the border. So they just keep it like down low. But I think like all the things I mentioned around like I think it's limitless, honestly, like around just like recovery with certain cannabinoids, individual protocols, based on the individual's needs. Again, there's a huge, I'm big into like the whole brain regeneration, TBI movements. I think the whole world of like treating guys, with cannabinoids for brain issues, concussion issues, substance abuse. I mean, people say, well, cannabis is a gateway drug. From my experience, what I've seen, and that Darren McCarty I mentioned, like he'll say it's an exit drug. It helps people get off alcohol and off pharmaceutical drugs, right? So there's an element of helping guys deal with substance abuse issues, right? So I think it's going to be huge. There might even be an element of actual performance you're seeing, like in the psilocybin mushroom space, or even like marathon runners, for example, like they'll train, they'll eat and ingest, they'll ingest maybe 25 milligrams of THC or whatever, maybe less. I mean, depending on the person, and then they go run for like 3 hours or whatever. Like there's actually part of their training. I know some martial artists that are microdosing THC, 1 milligrams, 2 milligrams before they go and train. They just feel like they can be a little more loose because they're less rigid, right? They're a little more calm and relaxed. So I think there's probably that whole world of performance too. So I think it's got a big part of sports, and keeping players and athletes healthy. So and on top of big money going into sports, right? Sports sponsorship, as this thing becomes more legal to bank and legal to advertise, especially in Canada there. But yeah, it's huge. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is on that. I would think in 5 years that I would even less. I say 3 years, you're going to see one of these large multi-state operators sponsor, whether it's the league itself or pro sports teams. But I know that Canopy Growth is just waiting in the weeds to be the lead sponsor of the NHL. So it's not too far off.
Hopefully it's going to be in that way, and the federal laws are going to help in the United States also, like for border issues, so you can move between Canada and the United States and without any kind of problem, and be working
Right.
on the, and it's going to be really helpful as well for all the sports, hockey, football, are all of them. Well, Riley, I want to thank you one more time for this excellent interview. It was a great pleasure. It was great. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.